Hello, divine creations, divine marvels, children of God. Thank you so very much for dropping by this video. This video is primarily for people who have some knowledge and experience with Bruno Gröning's teachings. If you're new to Bruno Gröning and his teachings, you may find this video a little confusing, but maybe not. Maybe you'll get a lot of benefit out of it. To learn more about Bruno, you can check out my website, which I've got a link in the chat box and a link below. So, Bruno taught, and I've experienced, and many of us on this channel have experienced, that nothing is impossible and nothing is incurable for God. That the power of God can heal anything, can change a relationship, can change a situation just through taking in the divine energy or taking in the divine energy and asking it to flow towards a specific situation. This raises a very interesting question on a practical day-to-day level. So then what part do things such as medicine, like pharmaceutical medicine, more holistic medicine like herbs, healthy lifestyle, counseling, things that I call relative forms of healing, what part do they have on the spiritual path? And specifically for those of us who just think the world of Bruno Gröning and strive to live by his teachings. So I don't come before you as someone who has all the answers. I never come before you as someone who has all the answers. But I want to share some of my experience. I want to share some of my experience with this topic and hopefully give you food for thought. So I went through a period after my first healing where I pretty much let go of all relative forms of wellness. I really just relied on higher power and God. And that really worked for as long as it worked. And then at a certain point, I noticed that I was needing more. And it didn't make sense to me because let me backtrack. Actually, when I went in to and found out about Bruno Gröning's teaching, I was relying completely on various relative means for my wellness and my health. Then I was skeptical but open. After my first healing, maybe after a couple of healings, then I started to only rely on the Heilstrom, on the divine power, on the healing stream, and kind of had judgments about things such as doctors and herbs and supplements, and just thought, oh, those aren't necessary. And then over time, I found that I needed more. I needed those things, that certain things weren't healing. And I found those things supportive and helpful. But there's been this kind of tug of war in my mind, which is now finally starting to resolve. And I think many people on this path kind of go through their own version of this tug of war. And part of what's helping me to resolve it is talking to Christians, specifically Christians who believe in and or practice their own form of spiritual healing, which they use slightly different words. Obviously, they don't ask Bruno Gröning for help. They ask Christ or God the Father for help, or the Holy Spirit. They use different words. And but fundamentally, there's a lot of similarity. And so, for example, I was talking to a friend I have today who's a very, very beautiful soul, a very, very devout Christian, not rigid or dogmatic, but very, very committed to her Christian faith. And she had a very serious health condition to where she had to get blood transfusions I believe it was something like every 5 days. Now think about that. And if she didn't, she was going to die. She did that for months. Now, being a devout Christian, she was praying on it. Uh, you know, maybe the Christian version of Einstellung, of tuning in, is asking to receive the Holy Spirit, but she was doing that. She had other people doing that for her. She utterly believed in God's power, that God could heal this. And then at a certain point, she started to take a homeopathic remedy that someone she knew was into homeopathy and suggested that this might help. And that seemed to help a little bit. And she kept on praying and she kept on receiving the blood transfusions. And then one day, it completely healed. Now, here's the interesting thing. She had no hesitation about taking the blood transfusions. Now, this is a bit of an extreme example because if she didn't, she was going to die. But she also, at a certain point, she had no hesitation about trying the homeopathy. And that kind of paused me in my tracks because for a long period of time, if I was in her shoes, I would have just done the blood transfusions and just done Einstellung and asked people to do Einstellung for me. Einstellung means to tune in, to receive the divine power. And I would have been very hesitant and avoidant almost to try other things such as homeopathy or herbs or supplements. But she was completely open. For her, it was almost as if, yes, they were different things, like the medical treatments, the homeopathy, and the spiritual healing. Obviously, they're different modalities, but she didn't, in any kind of rigid way, she didn't divide or split them up. It was almost like she was open to trying whatever was helpful. And I've been really sitting with this. And I think for myself, and I think many people on this path, we kind of get into this like firm, like almost rigid divisions of like, there's spiritual healing and then there's everything else, and almost as if that everything else is bad or we should avoid it. And I've noticed this with other Christians who practice spiritual healing. Again, it's a little bit, there's definitely some differences between that and what Bruno Grüning taught, but it's more just different words, slightly different emphasis. Like they might not sit and do Einstellung for an extended period of time. They may not sit and seek to receive the Holy Spirit for an extended period of time. But other than that, it's pretty much the same thing. And I've noticed this absolute lack of rigidity, this absolute, like, let them work hand in hand. Like, yes, go to your doctor. And if it feels right, yes, do medication. If it feels right, do something holistic or alternative. And yes, receive the Holy Spirit, pray, and believe. There's just kind of this continuum. And it's really starting to shift my thinking. It's really starting to shift my thinking. Because here's the thing. Healing on the spiritual path, as taught by Bruno Grüning, isn't just receiving the Heilstrom. That's just not what Bruno Grüning taught. He talked about the great turnaround. The great turnaround isn't just the whole world. It's the great turnaround inside of each of us changing ourselves, growing and learning, and letting go of old habits, becoming more harmonious people. And so taking in Einstellung, taking in the Heilstrom, taking in the healing stream certainly can help with that. Not certainly, absolutely does help with that. But there's more to that. There's growing, there's learning, there's introspection. Bruno Grüning, I'll have to paraphrase, but he instructed people to be honest with themselves about their faults. He also instructed people to reflect at the end of every day and notice everything that they did that was not harmonious or wrong. Make a firm determination to do better. He also said, if a healing doesn't occur, and this is almost a direct quote, it's from memory, but if a healing doesn't occur, it's because the person has not achieved the spiritual maturity yet. So healing on this path isn't just getting rid of the evil, of the illness, of the disease. It's also changing ourselves. It's also growing and learning. Sometimes there's grace. Sometimes there's just an illness just goes with little to no effort, sometimes even. I've experienced that. But sometimes there have to be massive internal changes. And so, and that can take time. You know, one thing that Bruno, right when I first began, I had a dream about a major imbalance in my life. And that was in 2012, and it's 2023, and I'm just beginning to make that change. This isn't about a physical illness. It took 11 years for me to even be willing to make that change. And so given that some healings take time and that some learnings take time, might it be best in certain circumstances to take medicine, to use some of these other relative means? In the past, I would have been no. I was very fervent. No, just tune in, just believe. I judged myself and others who did that. And now I see that that was a very shallow understanding of Bruno Gruning's teachings, because ultimately the teaching is to follow God. And what's best? And it was kind of like following this formula of like, I'm just going to tune in. I'm just going to just believe. Give the illness away, tune in and believe. Give away negative thoughts. That's very important. That's not the full story. So this is a very delicate topic because I'm, on the one hand, I don't want to weaken anyone's faith. God is infinite and omnipotent. In fact, Bruno Gruning, we often hear it said, nothing is impossible for God. But if you read the German, it says, God is nothing impossible. So yes, the divine power can do anything. Just take a look at the universe. Just take a look at our sun. It would take they estimate it would take 100 million Earths to fill the sun. And we look at it and it's just this little speck in the sky. And that's just our solar system, much less our galaxy, much less the universe. So on the one hand, I'm not here to tell you to not believe in the unlimited power of God. But then on the other hand, just because God is the supreme physician, just because God has limitless power, that doesn't mean we shouldn't do something like take medicine or see a counselor or take herbs. Ultimately, it's not only a personal decision, but it's between each person and God to seek God's will in each situation. I'm here as an advocate for non-rigid thinking, because for a while I made Bruno Gruning's teachings into a religion, like a formula, a to-do list. And that's not what Bruno taught or wanted at all. Bruno Gröning called us back to nature and back to God, back to reliance on God and living close to nature. So, of course, ultimately, pharmaceutical medications are not going to be part of that. Ultimately. But in the short term, it's not for me to say what someone should or shouldn't do. And ultimately, that might be skillful. Not ultimately, in the short term, that might be what's best for each person. So let's spend a few minutes tuning in together. You are welcome, Robert. Let's ask to be guided. There are two further thoughts I'd like to add on this topic. One of them is some things are not going to heal in this lifetime. You take the example of Emily Couscous, and I may be mispronouncing her name, the girl who Bruno Gröning said he couldn't help, and then later on her parents sued Bruno Gröning, and it caused quite a bit of trouble. I've shared this before, Alfred Hosp, many healings with Bruno Gröning, but there was one thing that didn't heal, and Bruno Gröning said that was by design. It was part of literally Freddie, Alfred's learning to have this one thing not heal that was setting the stage for his next lifetime. I think of my precious cats. One of my cats was at death's door. She went from being this big to being this big. And I'm not exaggerating, the doctors were suggesting I put her to sleep. And I tuned in. I asked everyone to tune in. I put pictures of Bruno all around her. I asked Bruno every hour for help. I gazed with Brazzo, a picture of her with Brazzo. I played Brazzo's voice in the background. She made a full recovery. She came back from death's door. Medically impossible. I have another cat who has a medical condition, and it wasn't deadly, but she was just she was losing weight, and her energy dropped by about 90%. And I felt to start giving her medication. And lo and behold, she got better. So, what to do in each circumstance is really, I wish there was a formula. And the formula, if there is a formula, it's to seek guidance from God. So, a few things to think about. Again, I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm just sharing some of my reflections on this topic. And I really appreciate everyone who took the time to watch this and reflect on this. Have a blessed day. Take care.